Hey guys, Sean from Trail Grid Pro. Today we are super excited to introduce our newest plug-and-play bundle for your 2016 to 2023 Toyota Tacoma, featuring our exclusive JBL Amp Bypass. Included in this bundle is the Kicker CXA 660.5, our JBL Amp Bypass pre-terminated for your Toyota Tacoma, all the necessary hardware to complete the installation, your power and ground wire, your fuse holder, speaker wire, 6-channel RCAs, and we include a RCA Y adapter in case your aftermarket radio only has one subwoofer pre-out. Our amplifier bundle can be used on factory or aftermarket speakers. By adding this, you're going to get better sound, better bass response, better highs, and more overall volume. So let's go over some of the tools necessary to complete the installation. We're going to want a screw gun, impact driver or socket wrench with a 14mm socket, pair of crimpers, pair of side cutters, and a pair of strippers, a 12mm, 10mm sockets, some wire ties, panel popper, handheld Phillips screwdriver, handheld small flathead screwdriver, a panel removal tool, a 3mm Allen wrench, as well as a razor knife. Also included in the Kicker box, they give you a 3mm small Allen wrench. We're also going to want to have some electrical tape, as well as potentially some Tessa tape, and we're going to want to have a wire fish. So the only thing I don't have out here right now that we may need is you're going to want to have some sort of lube, WD-40, soap, just to pass the power wire through your factory grommet. So let's go over some of the controls of the input of our CXA 660.5 as well as our controls. So on our input side, we have our ground, our remote, and our power. We have our front and rear speaker wires, and we have our subwoofer output wires. All of our wires on our JBL Amp Bypass will connect right into this section. The wires are all color-coded to industry standards, so you'll have white and white with a black stripe to the left front, gray and gray with a black stripe to the right front, green and green with a black stripe to the left rear, and purple with a black stripe to the right rear. As far as the subwoofer, you'll have red and orange to positive, and black and orange with black to the negative. So let's go to the other side of the amp where all of our controls are and our RCA connections. So we have our front RCA connections, our rear, and our subwoofer. Now our RCAs will be marked with where they need to be plugged in at, and I'll show you that during the installation as well. So the first button is our fader control. We're going to leave that on. Next is our high or low level input. We're going to leave that on low level. Next is our subwoofer, whether we're plugging in via the RCA or allowing it to get its information from the front and rear channels. We are using subwoofer RCA, so we'll leave that plugged in. We have our gain control and our crossover control for the front speakers. Then we have our gain and crossover control for the rear speakers. And then on the bottom is our gain, crossover, and bass boost controls for our subwoofer. Now in this installation, we're going to be amplifying all the speakers, including the factory JBL subwoofer. If you're going to be amplifying a aftermarket subwoofer, we do provide the speaker wire to plug into the subsection of the amplifier, and you'll just have to run that back to wherever your subwoofer is. So now that we've gone over everything included in our bundle, as well as all the necessary tools to complete the installation, let's go and begin the disassembly of the truck. So what you're going to want to look for to determine if you have a JBL amplified vehicle is the JBL logo on the driver or passenger door speaker grill. If you don't have that logo, then you do not have the factory JBL amplifier. Before we begin disassembly, let's just go over where the factory JBL amp is. It is located behind the passenger rear seat underneath a plastic cover. Now it's all in one. It's your factory sub as well as where the JBL amp is located. So to begin disassembly, we're going to start by removing the cover from the factory subwoofer, and then we're going to go ahead and remove all the sill plates as well as the B panel and the front kick panel. So tools necessary to do this: we're going to want a screw gun with a 10mm or a 10mm in a socket. We're going to need a impact driver or socket with a 14mm on it, as well as a panel removal tool for the sill plates and the kick panel. So to begin, make sure our passenger front seat is pushed forward. We're going to lift up on the bottom of the rear seat, lift that up, pull the handle to drop the rear seat, and then drop the headrest, drop that all down. Now you'll see there is one 10mm bolt holding this plastic panel on. Now in some of the later models, there may actually be 2 or 3 10mm bolts. So they'll be located on the other side and then one on the bottom. So let's first go ahead and remove this 10mm. Make sure we set that aside and put that somewhere where we're not going to lose it or forget it. So once this 10mm is out, we'll need to fold down the driver's side rear seat as well as the headrest. And then there are 3 10mm bolts holding on the driver's side. We'll need to remove those. Now once those 3 10mm are out, this will be loose. You can pop that out and then pop the cover for the amplifier out and just remove. So the driver's side actually holds in the passenger side. That's why we have to remove those bolts. So now setting that aside, it reveals our factory subwoofer enclosure as well as our JBL factory amplifier. So we're going to leave that alone for right now and continue removing the rest of the sill plates, B panel, and the front kick panel. Starting at the rear passenger, just go ahead and gently pop and remove. That'll expose the wire chase on the rear of the vehicle. We're going to go ahead and move to the front passenger door, remove that sill plate, and then remove the 14mm bolt holding the seat belt in the B pillar and get that all removed. So same as in the rear, go ahead, get your panel removal tool under, gently pull up and remove, again exposing the wire chase. So now we're going to move to the B pillar, get that 14mm seat belt bolt removed, and get that B pillar plastic off. So next we need to remove the 14mm bolt from the seat belt. First we need to remove the cover. So just gently grab and remove, revealing that bolt. So once that's removed, it will become free. So the easiest way to get this out, you'll just gently pull out on your rubber trim just around that B pillar, both front and rear. So now that that's all released, you can just gently pop all the pins off and remove. So we're mainly doing that so we can run our JBL amp bypass up, under, and then to the passenger front seat. So since we're already back in the back seat area, let's go ahead and remove the 2 bolts holding the front passenger seat in. by removing the two plastic covers first by just lifting up and pulling towards the rear. And then again with your 14mm socket, remove the first one. And the second one. Now those two are removed. We can move to the front of the passenger side, get our kick panel out, and get our 2 bolts to completely remove the seat. So now moving to the front part of the passenger seat, need to remove the 2 14mm bolts there, as well as 3 plugs. You do not have to remove the seat to do the installation. It does make it easier though, however, but if you have any reservations about unplugging anything or unplugging any airbags, please just leave it leaned up. So we'll get these removed. Remove those 2 14mm bolts, lift the seat up, and you'll have 3 plugs. You'll have a white one, a gray one, and a yellow one. That is the seat airbag. Be careful. So go ahead and unplug the white one, as well as the gray plug, and finally the yellow airbag plug. Just be careful when you're removing it out of the vehicle not to hit any of the plastic parts on the door panel or anywhere else. Usually helps to remove the headrest. Set that on the seat, and then just pick up and remove. So we have one more piece to remove, the lower kick panel. There is a small plastic nut holding that on, so just go ahead and remove that by unscrewing it and then pulling out on the kick panel to release. You will have these push pins in. If they fall out or if they stay inside the vehicle or inside the truck, go ahead, pop them out and place them back on. So now that we have everything down here, one more thing to remove. We're actually going to remove the glove box so we can run our RCAs and remote wire a little easier down along and down through the chase. So to do that, we'll need to remove some plastic covers, some 10mm bolts, as well as some Phillips head screws. So let's start that now. So to remove the glove box, we're going to need to remove the outer cover. We're going to grab our panel popper, gently slip it in and pry out, removing the clips. Then we need to just gently remove this plastic panel by pulling. Again, just clips. There's 2 10mm bolts here, as well as one down towards the center console. So let's go ahead and remove those. So once those are removed, we will just gently pull on that lower section to release the airbag. Keep that out of your way for now. So we have 5 Phillips head screws to remove the glove box entirely. One here, one here, one underneath towards the center console, and then 2 in the glove box. One here and one here. So let's go ahead and remove those. And then last but not least, the one inside. Once those 5 are removed, you can feel the glove box is loose. Just pull towards you and remove. Now that the disassembly portion of the truck is complete, we can move to the radio and get our radio out to reveal our RCA connections and our remote connections. get that run and in the area of underneath the passenger seat. And then after that, we can start doing our power wire. So we'll have to remove our aftermarket radio. Now there's lots of aftermarket radios. Depending on what you have, this may be a little different. In this particular one, we have a 10.1 inch floating screen. So let's get to removing it. So now that we've removed the 4 screws holding in the screen, we can just slide that out, set that safely to the side. So what we're really worried about, and if you have a normal doubled-in style radio, you're just going to start at this point. So just gently pry on that part of the dashboard, making sure all the clips stayed in. Once the dash is removed, that will reveal the 4 10mm bolts that are holding in our aftermarket radio. So we'll get those out. So now we can slide out our aftermarket radio, and that will reveal our RCA pre-outs here. They are located on this side of this aftermarket radio. So next we want to grab our RCAs. So the RCAs will be already labeled for you, so you know exactly where to plug them in on both the radio side and the amplifier side. So they'll be marked with a LF for left front, a RF for right front, a LR for left rear, and a RR for right rear, and the subwoofer will be marked with an SL and an SR. So now we can go ahead and start plugging each thing in. So on this particular unit, the subwoofer is on the bottom, so the right side will plug into the red and the left side will plug into the white. Now we'll look for our front. So in this unit again, the front is actually the middle set of RCAs. Left will go into the white, right will go into the red. And then we have our rear RCAs. Again, left will go into white, right will go into red. So we want to make sure those are pushed in all the way, won't easily come out. Next, we'll want to find our remote output. Our kit will come with the bullet connector already connected, the male side. You'll just plug that in, making sure that that plastic is covering all of the metal. Once we have our RCAs and remote wire connected, we can go ahead and start running them in through the dash. So we're actually going to go straight through and just get them down on the floor for now, so we can get our radio back in the dash and reinstalled. So go ahead and slide your aftermarket radio back in, making sure it lines up with the holes, and then you can go ahead and get the 4 10mm bolts back in and secured. So go ahead and screw them back down. Once you have your 4 bolts back in, you can go ahead and grab your dashboard piece. Now, if you have any kind of accessories on top of your dash, if you've unplugged them, make sure you plug them back in. Get your dashboard back lined up. And get that all pushed back in. Once that's done, if you have a normal 7-inch double din screen, you're done. We can start running the RCAs. I'm going to put our 10.1-inch floating screen back on, so we are done with that portion of it. Start my 2 bolts, then tighten them up. Put my cover plate back on, and then put my 2 bolts that hold the cover plate back on. Now that we have our radio reinstalled back into the dash, we can go ahead and finish running our RCAs underneath the passenger seat. After that, we'll go ahead and start running the power wire for the amplifier. So now we have our head unit back in place, we can actually go ahead and run our RCA to underneath the passenger seat. So there's a couple different ways you can run your RCAs. So you can either run them across the top behind the factory airbag on top of the dash and then down. You can run them back through and down. I personally like running them down the transmission tunnel. That way everything stays separated. Plus, if you have some aftermarket goodies already on your Tacoma, your wire chase may be already filled up with pre-existing wires. So what we are going to do, we are going to run down this way, behind, and then into underneath. So let's go ahead and get that started now. And we're not going to wire tie anything until we're all done with the final installation and the initial testing. Grab our panel tool, continuing to run through the transmission well here. We're going to reach up under the carpet, pull some of the carpet, drop our RCAs down, and bring them out of where our plugs are. Now we'll have a fair amount of RCA left, but we're going to want to keep all that available. We can just pull some of that back to the beginning of where we ran it, and we will secure that once we are all done. And then always make sure to tuck the carpet back underneath. If you need to grab your panel tool, there we go. So we have some of our extra here that we will eventually wire tie up. Now that our RCAs and remote wire are run to underneath the passenger seat, we can go ahead, move to the front of the vehicle, and run our power wire. We're going to start by grabbing our fuse holder and our 3mm Allen wrench and getting our power wire all set into here. So just go ahead and loosen those bolts up. And take our one side, get that tightened down. Making sure it won't come out. We can go ahead and grab our other side, and you're going to want to do the side with the spider wrap on it. Go ahead and stick that in. And tighten that down. And putting your cover plate back on. So now we have it. It's not going out. It's not going to fall out. So when you're setting your fuse holder in, you want to make sure that you place it somewhere that the ring terminal will be able to attach to the power wire. So we're going to go about there. That will be able to attach the power wire, but we're not going to attach it yet. We're going to get it run, get it into the truck. So now we have all this extra power wire. So we're going to go up across the back of the firewall and then drop it down to the passenger side. There's a grommet that we're going to cut through and then run the power wire in. So go ahead and just kind of get that run loosely for now. Now we have it in the general area of where we're going to be. Go ahead and grab some wire ties and start gently tying it to some of the factory wiring, keeping it up and out of the way of any heat source. You don't have to tighten it all the way quite yet. So now we've got it wire tied, we can go ahead and move into the cutting of the grommet and wiring it into the cab of the truck. Now this vehicle already has had some aftermarket equipment installed. So right here is where we're going to make our cut. So now that we've made our cut, we will go ahead and grab our wire fish and insert it into the hole that we just cut, running it into the vehicle. So now that we're in the vehicle, we're going to take our other end of the power wire and tape it to our wire fish. Once we have it taped, we can start feeding it in. Now, as I told you in the beginning of the video, you may want to have some Dawn soap or some kind of WD-40 or something for a lube just to make sure it gets through. So I'm just going to put a little squirt on here. So get a little squirt of lubricant on there. Go ahead and continue to push that wire fish in. And then I'm going to go on the inside of the vehicle and pull it through. So now that it's mostly in the vehicle, we're actually going to pull a little bit back out just to give ourselves something to wire tie the power wire to. So we'll go ahead and grab another wire tie. Wire tie the power wire, and then just give ourselves just a little extra there. So now, if you're happy with how everything looks on the inside of the engine bay, you can go ahead and cut your wire ties, do any extra cleanup you want to do. But we are still not hooking up the power until after we get our amplifier installed. So we can go ahead and take everything out from underneath the hood for now and go back into the inside of the vehicle and finish running our power wire. So now our power wire is in the vehicle. Just need to remove it from the wire fish and then run it in the channel or underneath the carpet. So we'll get this all off. Pull this out, set that aside. So now as far as the power wire, you can run it one of a couple different ways. You can run it underneath the carpet, run it in the middle of the vehicle, run it through the channel. You're going to have a little bit of extra. So in this case, we're going to run it down. And behind the carpet. Then we're going to lift this carpet up and go ahead and pull it straight through. Like I said, we're going to have a little bit extra, but we're going to wire tie that underneath the carpet so you won't ever see it. So now that the power wire is run, we can go ahead and run our JBL Amp Bypass up here, get that where it's supposed to be. And then we'll attach the ground, and then we can start wiring the amp. So now we're going to start running our JBL Amp Bypass. In this installation, we are actually going to be repowering the factory subwoofer. If you have a aftermarket subwoofer, now would be the time to also run your subwoofer wire to the amplifier. So we're going to start by then gaining access to the factory amp, lifting up the rear seat and folding the back down, getting the headrest to drop, getting that pushed all the way down. So the JBL amplifier will have 3 main plugs. We are going to be using the 12 pin and the 10 pin. The bottom plug we will not use, and we want to confirm that, again, if we're amplifying our factory sub, we leave that sub plugged in. So we'll go ahead and remove our 10 pin plug as well as our 12 pin plug. Grabbing our JBL Amp Bypass, matching 10 and 12 pin plugs. The 10 pin, which is the black plug, plug that in, and the 12 pin, which is the white pin, plug that in. So to run this, I've found it easiest to drop it underneath the seat. Then we'll actually lift up the carpet to finish running it. So we'll go ahead and get that dropped down, fold the seat back up. Now we have it exposed here, so we can grab our carpet, popping up the holders, reach in under, and then grab our harness, pull that through. So now we have it outside. We can go ahead and begin to run our harness towards the front of the vehicle. Basically, when you get to about the B pillar, you can go ahead and lock that carpet back in, and then get the carpet next to the seat all back in and correct. Making sure, just reaching in, just double checking everything, making sure it's down. Then you can go ahead, fold the seat back down, fix your headrest. So from the B pillar, you can continue running past the seatbelt bolt. So here, we're gonna pop up the carpet, run that in, and pull it through. Still, again, not wire tying anything until we have our amplifier all connected, which is what we're gonna do next. So we have one last thing to do to prepare for installing and wiring up our amp. That is ground. So underneath the seat area, underneath the carpet, there is a factory ground right here. We're going to go ahead and remove this 10 millimeter, attach our amp ground, and then run it through. Right back through. Go ahead and tighten it back up. So now that's tight, we can go ahead and take our other end and run it through the same hole as the power and the amp bypass. There we go. So now everything is run, we can begin with hooking up the amplifier. So we'll grab our amplifier, start on the RCA side, and grab our RCAs. So we have front left, front right, rear left, rear right, and subwoofer left and subwoofer right. So we'll grab our RCAs and plug them in corresponding. So I grabbed rear first. So left will go into the white, right will go into the red. Next we have subwoofer, so subwoofer left will go into the white, subwoofer right will go into the red, and last but not least, we have our front. Left front will go into white, and right front will go into red. We'll make sure they're all pushed down correctly. So next we're going to make our power, ground, and remote connections. On this It's ground first, remote's in the middle, power is on the inside. So you're going to use your 3mm Allen wrench, either the one that you had or the one that came inside the amp box. Go ahead and loosen all of those up. We're going to start with our ground. Get that in there first. Get that tightened down. Then go ahead and grab our power wire. Get that in there. Tighten down. And then we will grab our remote. We'll go in the middle there and go ahead and tighten that down. If you need to relieve some of the tape that's holding the remote lead onto the RCAs, go ahead and remove that. So now we have our power and ground connections done. We can move on to our amp bypass wires. First on the top, we have our left front. Then we have our right front. Then moving to the bottom, we have our left rear and right rear. And then the last two, top and bottom, top is subwoofer positive and the bottom is subwoofer negative. Go ahead and loosen the screws up. With this particular amp, it is easier to start with the rear speakers, which are on the bottom. So we'll grab our green and our purple wires. So get some of these other ones out of the way. There we go. In order to start this, we're going to go ahead and use our solid green wire that is left rear positive, and then move to our green with a black stripe that is left rear negative. Then we have our purple wire that will be our right rear positive, and then our purple and black will be our right rear negative. So once those are in, you can go ahead and screw them down. If you're more comfortable doing them one at a time, that's absolutely fine. So now all four of those are in. So we're actually going to go ahead and attach our subwoofer negative. So we're going to grab our black and orange with black, slide that into the bottom, tighten that one down. Now if you're running an aftermarket subwoofer or subwoofer enclosure and you're running the yellow and black wire, the black wire would go down on the bottom and the yellow wire would go on top. Since we're running just the factory subwoofer, we're going to use the wires in the amp bypass. So now we're going to go the opposite way for the positive subwoofer and the front speakers. So we're actually going to start with our red and orange. Put that in, place that in first. Go ahead and screw that one down. Then we have our gray with a black stripe. And then we have our gray wire, white with a black stripe, and then finally our white wire. Now that we have everything hooked up, we can actually go back to the front of the vehicle and hook up our fuse holder to the battery, give our amplifier power, give it a check on the head unit, make sure our balance and our fader is correct, and then we can go ahead and start cleaning up some of the wires and get this thing mounted and get the truck put back together. So back up front to the battery, we're going to go ahead and hook up our fuse and our power wire. So we're going to remove the 12mm from the battery, place our fuse holder and power back on, and just go ahead and tighten it right back down. Now that that's done, as long as you're happy with how all the wires run and that you have your wire ties cut off, You're done in the engine bay and you can go ahead and close your hood. Before we start cleaning our wires up, we need to turn the radio on, make sure our balance and fade is correct, and also adjust the amp gains to correctly match our speakers. So go ahead and turn our radio on. We'll go ahead and get into Apple CarPlay. We'll play some music. So let's give it a little volume, then we'll check our balance and fade. So our balance and fade is correct. I hear my subwoofer playing. So now we can actually go in, take a look at the amp, and just adjust the gains accordingly. So let's go over and double check some of the settings and gains on our amp. So spin that around. Okay, so first we have our fader in. Next we have our high and low input. We're going to want to be on low, so that is out. Next to that is our subwoofer input. We want to have it on sub, so we want that in. As far as the gain and the crossovers, first we have our front speaker gains. Leave the white dot set to around 10 o'clock. Crossover for the front speakers, leave that around 10 o'clock too. That should be somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 to 100 hertz. Moving over to our rear speakers, same thing. Gain at about 10 o'clock, so we'll just adjust that up just a hair. And since it is a smaller set of speakers in the rear compared to the front, we're going to actually have our gain up a little bit, more around 11 o'clock. And again, depending on what speakers you have in the vehicle, will change where you put your crossovers. Now, as far as the subwoofer controls, we're at about 12 o'clock on the gain, 11 o'clock on the crossover settings, which would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 hertz. And then you have your bass boost. Now, that's a personal preference. I like mine down. Depends on the style and type of music you listen to, if you're going to want to turn that up. Now that we have our amplifier gains and crossover controls set, we can go ahead, get the amp spun around in a decent position and start cleaning up all of our extra wires. And then we'll get our amp mounted and start putting the truck back together. I'm going to start up here with the extra RCA wires, loop them up, just getting them up out of the way. Get a wire tie on there so they stay together. Then we're going to go ahead and get it behind the dash and the transmission tunnel, hidden away nicely. So now we can move to our power, ground, and our bypass wires. Get them as neat as possible, however you so choose. Now we have a little bit of extra power wire to contend with. I usually like doing the power wire in front of the passenger seat, just so I'm not jamming a whole bunch of stuff underneath here. So I'll get it to look pretty nice there, throw some wire ties on that. And depending on how you run your power wire will be how much extra you have. Lift this up and just slide it underneath, still keeping it all nice and neat underneath. Get our carpet back down. So the last thing we have to do is actually get our amp mounted down. Now it's a Tacoma, so it doesn't have a ton of room underneath the seat, so we have to be relatively accurate where we place it. We're going to want it right here in the middle and as close up as we can get to the seat lift. So inside your installation bag, You'll have some industrial Velcro. You can use the industrial Velcro. You can use screws if you so choose. They are inside the box of the Kicker amplifier. But we'll get these on here. Spin our amp back around. Get it right about there. So now it's on there. So we can just go ahead and get some of our wires and pulled back into that hole just so they're out of the way. There we go, all back down. Let's just double check everything. So everything is back and put away. We have our 3 connectors for our seat. So now we can begin with putting the truck back together. I'm going to start with the glove box. Same way you pulled it out. Slide it up into place. Get it to lock in, and you're going to have the 5 screws to stick back in. One in this far corner. One right here. One here. One right here. And then one down here at the bottom. So now that that's back in, we can go ahead and place our airbag back in, lining up the holes, and just push. We should have one 10mm bolt here and 2 on this side. So we can go ahead, get those started. And the one on this side. And go ahead and tighten them all the way down. Cover piece here, just lining up the red plastic clips. Get that locked in. And then again, the side panel goes in, lining up those red plastic clips. That's all back on. So now we can move on to putting the B pillar back in, getting that lined up, and then getting the seatbelt bolt reconnected. So next for the B pillar, again, just make sure you have your weather stripping pulled out enough to get it back on. Slide it in, just lining up the clips and push in. There we go, just like that. And then you can go ahead and slide back on the weather stripping, making sure it's down all the way on both the front and rear door. And then we can go ahead and put in our 14mm seatbelt bolt. Get that on and going, and then tighten her up. If you want to tighten this down to factory spec, it is about 30 foot-pounds. We're going to go ahead and grab our seatbelt cover and just snap it on, and then lift it up so it stays. So from here, we can go ahead and grab our front seat, put our front seat back in, get that rebolted and plugged in, and then we can move on to the rest of the trim panels. So we want to make sure we plug our seat back in first. Get it lined up with the holes. Get our bolts started by hand. Slide it up. Go to the rear and get those lined up and started. And we can go ahead and tighten them. If you want to torque down the seat back to factory specs, it is 27 foot-pounds. So go ahead and throw on the rear covers. And then we can move back up front, tighten that one down, and then we can get the kick panel and the sill plate back on. So tighten the first one. Headrest back in. So let's go ahead and get our kick panel and our sill plate back in. And making sure we put the plastic nut back on. Now for the sill plate, into position. Pushing that down. Now moving back to the back door, we can go ahead and lift up our seat. Go ahead and replace the sill plate in the rear door, lining everything up. So the last step in getting our Tacoma back together is going to be replacing the trim panels for the factory subwoofer and amplifier. Flip up the bottoms of both seats, fold the top seats down, slide it in, and then there's 4 10mm bolts that need to go back in. On some of the newer models, there's only 2 10mm bolts on the driver's side, so just keep that in mind. So once the seats are down, you have to remember that when this panel goes back in, you need to slide it and it needs to go behind the panel on the driver's side. So once that slides in, just line up the child safety latches, and then you'll also have to line up your push pins that are on the back of the, get it in. You also want to check, make sure that your bolt that you need to reinstall is in the proper location. So just making sure everything's pushed in. Grab our bolt, get that locked in. Now we'll just have to get this set back into place. Everything is there. So I'm going to go ahead and fold this side back up, back to where it needs to go. Come over on the driver's side and get those 3 bolts bolted back in. So we want to make sure all of our push pins are back in and our 3 holes are lined up for our bolts. Go ahead and get those bolts started. And get those bolted in. Once that's all done, you can go ahead and fold your seat back up. Now that we've completed the install, it's time to take a final listen and hear the difference between the factory JBL amplifier and our new Kicker bundle. All right, so let's take a listen, see how she sounds. What a huge difference between the factory JBL amplifier and our new Kicker plug-and-play bundle. Subwoofer sounds better and louder. The door speakers are twice as loud, and the tweeters are bright and crisp. This bundle would go perfectly with our 6-speaker Kicker KS speaker bundle. So if you have any questions or would like to purchase this bundle, please visit us at trailgridpro.com. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And as always, have a blast out there.